Hi, folks. Chris Voss here from the ChrisVossShow.com, the ChrisVossShow.com. Hey, we're coming here with another great podcast. We certainly appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're seeing the live version of this, we updated with Windows Update this morning, and it's blowing out our cameras. No matter how many restarts we do, we can't get it fixed. So if you're watching it live, I do have the beautiful Rachel Greener. She is on the show to talk to us about her newest book that she has out, and we'll be going through that. It's called Making a Baby, June 22, 2021. It just came out. You can order it wherever great fine books are sold. So we'll be talking to her. So thanks for tuning in. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss. Hit the bell notification so you get all the notifications of everything we're doing over there, and you can find out. You can see all the groups we do on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, all those great places. Also, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss. You can see everything we're reading and reviewing over there as well. Today, we'll be talking with, as I mentioned before, Rachel Greener. She is a children's book editor from London who has edited fiction, nonfiction, and picture books about everything from the ancient Egyptians and ocean plastics to teenage detectives and zombie goldfish, of all things. I hate the zombie goldfish. That's always the Wednesdays. She wrote this book because she thinks it's important that all children have a chance to see their family story reflected in a book about where babies come from. We all know where they do. Storks, of course. They deliver them at night, I think, in those little bags. I saw that on a cartoon once. So welcome to the show, Rachel. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well, thank you. It's been a balmy day here in London, which makes a change because it's been pretty rainy this week.
Yeah, your guys' fun part there is the whole it's very cloudy a lot of times there in London.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, not that we notice really because we're all kind of effectively still in some kind of lockdown, but yeah.
There
look, you're back. You've arrived.
And I'm back. And clearly my green screen isn't fully over. So gotta love updates. There you go. I think we may have resolved it. So give us a reason. What motivated you want to write this book?
Well, I am actually also the publisher of the book in the UK. So when I was on maternity leave with my first son, I got called in to Nosy Crow, who are the independent British publisher that I work for, to interview for the role of head of nonfiction. And as part of my interview, I was asked to come up with an idea for a children's nonfiction book on any subject that doesn't exist, but that is necessary. So, it's this kind of, I had some time to prepare this before the interview. So I was kind of casting around, like, what am I going to present? What is, what's not already been done? And as I was on maternity leave, obviously babies were on my mind. I knew lots of other people in lots of different circumstances who were trying to start families or wanted to start families, but were facing various barriers. And I thought, I'll read the competition that's out there. I'll read the books that were around when I was young and see how stuff's moved on. And it turned out that while there are some really great, super inclusive books out there, I didn't really find any book that actually got down to the biological truth of the matter and was appropriate for young children. Right? Because there's a lot of books you can read that are beautifully inclusive and you can read them and they're wonderful, but you could come out of it as a 9-year-old or a 7-year-old and you still actually don't know really how it happens. And I also thought it was really important. Most of the books I read, not all, but most, they only ever referred to a mummy and a daddy. And I thought, what about all the other family stories out there who, what about all the other children who aren't seeing the story of their adoption or the fact that their parents used a surrogate or needed to use a donor sperm or a donor egg? Where are their stories? So I pitched the idea, I got the job, and about 6 months later, my boss said, when are we seeing this book? So I started working on it.
There you go. And you started working at 6 months after?
So I started working on the book about 6 months after I started my job. And but I'm not an expert. Obviously, I'm a publisher. I'm an editor. So I just wrote the book that I felt I would want to have seen when I was a kid, and the kind of information that I would like to be available for my son, who has read the book. He's 4. He hasn't actually read it. He can't read, but I've read it to him. And because I'm not an expert, we worked with one of the UK's leading LGBTQ plus charities. We worked with a midwife. We worked with a biology teacher. We worked with an academic expert who works on cell biology.
Mm-hmm.
So we really tried to cover all bases to make sure that this was a really scientifically accurate book that presented all birth stories on a level playing field.
Well, that's probably important too, because I mean, there's people nowadays that they're LGBTQ people, they get married, and they don't really have a normal birthing situation that you would have, and so the surrogates and different things, whatever. So that's important because I would be a kid going, "How'd this work?"
Yeah. And if you've read this book, if your child's read this book, I mean, one of the most important things about working in children's publishing is the idea that by helping children to read books about a really broad range of subjects, whether that's fiction or non-fiction, you're allowing a child to put themselves in someone else's shoes, and therefore you're really developing not only their worldview but their sense of empathy, because children do only know about their own experiences. But if they've been introduced to other people's experiences from a young age, it's not going to be surprising to them, or they're not going to feel like it's not as good as their own situation, because all those situations have already been shown to them. There is no right way to start a family. Every way to start a family is equal, and it's the love that matters.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people that do surrogate stuff, and I guess there's fertilization, I think, or
So
you
book,
probably know more than I do.
Yeah, so this book covers sex, and it actually explains what happens during sex. And there is a diagram which some people. So where we're sort of doing scientific stuff, I'll show you some of the spreads of the book. We kind of pull the information out into a sort of roundel, so like a sort of device to hold the scientific information. So here we've got lots of naked people, for example. I'm not. But you can see the kind of cross-section of a womb and of a penis. So you can understand the kind of technology. And we do have a page where there are people having sex. And there is a roundel that kind of explains what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
But for very young children that read this, those images, that they're beyond them, they don't really understand them. All they do is they look at the sort of broader pictures, which are more narrative, and they ask questions around those images. So we cover sex, we cover intrauterine insemination, we cover sperm and egg donation, IVF, surrogacy, adoption. And we also, as well as discussing all of these topics and looking at how a baby grows and also how it's born, so a vaginal birth versus a C-section, for example, which isn't really covered in many other books. We also talk about more difficult subjects, such as what happens when a baby's born too soon, or what happens, why do some babies not grow? So we're really trying to kind of give, I think the most important thing about this book is, I think for a lot of people, they grow up with a sense of kind of shame and anxiety around talking about sex and explaining sex, maybe because that's the way they were raised, or they don't feel confident talking to their children about it. So the reason we created this book was really to just give parents confidence in kind of having a springboard into having bigger conversations with their kids. This is all written in really simple language. We don't use any of those terms I've just talked about other than sex. We don't use IVI, IUI, or IVS. We just talk about kind of, how does the sperm meet the egg? These are the ways a sperm meets an egg. You need a sperm, an egg, and a place for it to grow, and a place for a baby to grow. Those are the three magic things you need to make a baby. And then we just kind of very factually look at how you put those things together in different ways.
Is this a book that, one of the challenges that parents always have is that aspect of explaining the birds and the bees to children? Does this help them resolve that issue and get out of that uncomfortable?
Yeah, I think so. I think also, if you have there are lots of different ways to approach this book, and every family is different. Every parent is different. Everyone raising a child is going to approach this in a different way, because there is no right or wrong way to do it. But I think there's so much, you do want your children to know this information and to know accurate information before they're, suddenly immersed in the world of smartphones and the internet when they're teenagers and can pick up all kinds of misinformation. You do want them to know the truth. And I think this book is really useful tool for allowing parents to find a way into that. So for a young child, you might just show them the page and you might not read any of the text. You might just ask them, what do you see in the picture? What do you think is happening? When I show my son that page, he's 4, with the about sex, he just says, the room is so messy. There are clothes all over the floor. And
where are their clothes?
Exactly. And I say, well, yes, that's because for these 2 people, in order for them to make a baby, they've had to take off their clothes. So even though you might not go into the full detail, you're already starting to introduce them to ideas around how babies are made. And so if they're not embarrassed by it, hopefully you won't be embarrassed by it, and vice versa. If as an adult you can be confident and not be embarrassed by what you're talking about, your children will feel comfortable coming to you with questions.
Mm-hmm. I think this is so important too, because one of the challenges people have is they don't have these conversations with their children. I know so many girls when I was a teenager were getting pregnant. They're like, I didn't really fully understand. I thought pulling out was fine, and all these different variations they had. They didn't really have a full, complete knowledge. I know it sounds weird, but they just didn't, and because of it, they got pregnant very early.
Yeah. So this book is really clear. So this book kind of goes straight from small children to adults, and it kind of skips the whole puberty thing, because what we're trying to do is demystify the process of how babies are made. We are actually working on a separate book at the moment, which will be about that kind of growing up and transition from childhood to adulthood and everything that entails. But in this book, because it's for very young children, for kind of 5, 6 to kind of 9-year-olds, it's not going into detail around puberty or anything like that, or relationships even. It's kind of quite factual and scientific. If 2 people want to make a baby, if one of them has a penis and one of them has a vagina, you can do it like this. If people don't have sperm or eggs that work properly, or they don't have a place to grow a baby, you can do it like this. So it's much more basic, I suppose, at this level, because it really is intended to be that very first introduction. I mean, in here on the kind of second page, we have some naked babies, and we're just talking about even properly labeling your own anatomy, because there are adults who don't understand that a vagina isn't the only part of a woman's genitalia. If you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think so.
So they don't know the word vulva, or if you don't have the right terminology, how can you be expected to talk to a doctor if there's a problem, if you don't know the proper words? So it's also a safety thing. There are lots of studies that suggest that children who can accurately name their anatomy and feel confident talking about it are less likely to be subject to abuse, because the people who might be perpetrators will be aware that these are children that are comfortable talking about such things, therefore are more likely to talk to an adult if something untoward happens, and also are more likely to be aware of things like consent and privacy, because if their parents are talking to them about those things at a young age, they're going to be more aware of them. So there are many reasons for including information like that.
And it's probably helpful, like you say, for, stranger danger conversations you can have with your children, where you're like, hey, if somebody, touches you in a certain place and does this, that, or the other, you need to tell dad, you need to, or mom, and you need to run off, and, that sort of thing. Might help in that way.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's, if you as a parent are confident in talking to your child about their body and about appropriate touching and inappropriate touching, those children are just going to be more well informed. So they are, they're going to be, hiding this kind of information, or not giving children this information because you want to protect them, isn't necessarily going to protect them.
Nice. Well, that's important. People need to understand this. And, I've known so many people over the years who've had trauma from childhood because their parents didn't talk to them or teach them right. I knew a lot of girls, like I said, in high school that got pregnant because they didn't fully understand like everything. And then, I've really been surprised. I've dated women in their 30s that really don't have a good understanding of what that area is about going on down there and stuff. And you're just like, seriously, you live with this thing for your life. But some people, there's like a shame sometimes to sex, or a shame to your body parts. Like if you come from certain religions, there's kind of a shaming process that, like, this is dirty, or this is bad, or this is wrong. If there's like all this sort of thing that goes on that I think really confuses people. So this can be pretty helpful to them.
Yeah. So this is the way we wrote it, was that it was meant to be really friendly, not scary, and a kind of an entry point. It's not exhaustive. It's only 32 pages long. It's really designed to just be that kind of icebreaker to help you have those conversations. And it depends how much you want to explain. If you were a single parent who had chosen to go down the route of IVF, you might want to explain that to your child, or you might rather just kind of explain all the different processes and not ever share that information. That's your decision. But at least it gives you the springboard that if you did want to have that conversation, that process has been explained on a level playing field with every other way that a family begins.
There you go. Well, this has been pretty interesting. Now, where does the stork come in? Where does that come in?
The stork is in here, actually. It is.
Is there really a stork in
it? Yeah. Well, the stork is in here because we talk about all the different myths.
So the myths. Okay.
The myths that parents tell children when they don't want to talk about it. And you can find, even with really young children, you can find really simple language. Like when my son was younger, for example, and he would ask, he'd see a picture of me and my husband at our wedding, and he would say, "But where was I?" Because they don't understand. And we'd just say, you were a tiny, like when he was smaller. Now he has read this book, so he does understand. But when he was smaller, we would say, you were a tiny piece of mummy and a tiny piece of daddy that hadn't met yet. So there are ways of even introducing that concept when they're really young. And then when they start asking questions, how did those two pieces meet? This book gives you the answers.
Awesome. Well, this is good. I should read this. I haven't had any kids yet, and clearly I haven't learned something. So that, or it could be the vasectomy. I'm not sure. But anything more you want to plug out on the book before we go out?
I just think if you feel anxious about talking to your children about sex or about where babies come from, that books are really helpful. Either this book or any other book you feel is the right book for you. They are such a helpful tool because it can be a shared experience, and it can really help to kind of bridge the gap and paper over, any cracks in your confidence.
Because the other thing is too, I should mention, kids learn a lot of weird stuff in like elementary school and junior high. Like I was totally confused because my friends would tell me stuff and be like, "What? That sounds like way different than what my mom told me," and I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I think this is really important to have something like this for them.
Thank you.
There you go. So Rachel, it's been wonderful to have you. Give us your plugs so people can find you on the interwebs, please.
So you can find this book wherever good books are sold. It's published by Penguin Random House, Dial for young readers. So you can also go to their website to find out more about it.
There you go. Pick up the book, guys. Making a Baby, June 22, 2021, just came out with Rachel Greener. I think this is really important. Like I said, I met so many people that I'm really surprised at how far they get in life, and they're really not, they're not familiar with their own bodies. They're not familiar, they've dealt with shaming or some sort of thing where it's like, oh, that's a bad thing. And, we're all just human. We just need to really just understand who the heck we are, and this I think this makes it great, because if I was a dad, I'd just be like, here, read this is the Birds and the Bees story, and we're never going to speak of this again. If you have questions, call Rachel. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, thanks so much for tuning in. Go to youtube.com/Chris Voss, hit the bell notification, goodreads.com/Chris Voss, and all of our groups on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and everything else. Thank you very much for being on the show with us, Rachel. We certainly appreciate it today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Moz, for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.